Today, on Energy Contact, we talk about people who have a healthy glow about them, who are beaming, radiant, or people who have a dark cloud around them, or maybe just people who put on airs. Well, you do have an energy field around you. You build it, and you maintain it, or not. Today, we're going to take a look at your aura. So sit back and relax, and be illuminated. It's coming up right now on Energy Contact.
And he ain't gonna worry, and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping, and I'll keep my mind on better things. He ain't gonna worry, and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping, and I'll keep my mind on better things.
Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series that I'm presenting to you as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of looking at yourself and a new way of looking at the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact with yourself internally and with your environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. These things are all exactly the same. There is something about us that just loves to parse these things out, classify, categorize them, put them each in their own little neat and separate compartments. But in fact, all that health and growth we're looking for take place when we do just the opposite. It happens when we put these things together, when we make an energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that's thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. And let's move forward with that. Let's bring up our first slide. Everyone please understand that I am not a doctor. This show is not a medical show of any kind. It's not a medical talk show, a medical advice show, a medical anything show. Couldn't be further from it. Now, I might call myself an energy healer or a chakra healer, things like that. So might a lot of other people. But state, federal, and local governments absolutely do not. They call me no such thing. It's important to understand that. There's lots of important information for you to understand on your screen right now. Please read all of that, if you will, with your full attention. When you've got it down, now would be a great time to locate a pencil and paper. Now here's why you want to do that. At the end of this show, we're going to run some credits, and on those credits there will be contact information for me. Now I invite and encourage you to contact me. In fact, I'm sort of hoping that something I have to tell you today will inspire you to want to do that. But in order to contact me, you're going to need that contact information. And in order to get it, you're going to need a pencil and paper. There will be plenty of time to jot that stuff down when the credits roll, if you have your pencil and paper ready. All right, let's come back up here. Today's show is show number 67. And if you're tuning in for the first time today, well, welcome and thanks. Thanks for joining me. You'll enjoy the show. These shows are sequential. They build. We're talking about things today that we've explained and introduced and defined previously. So there's some ramp-up stuff, some up-to-speed stuff that you will have missed out on. However, I do my very best to make sure that every show has a lot of value on a standalone basis. And I believe today's show does. So please stick around. If it is one of your first times, and if what you see piques your interest, well then I'll invite and encourage you to look around, because there will be earlier programs airing at later times. They'll either be re-airing right here on this station, or they'll be on at different days and different times in different areas. And if you look for them, I'll appreciate it. All right, and now is the time of the show where we introduce my co-host Slim. There's my buddy Slim on camera. Since we're investigating what energy contacts in the physical self, we have to understand a few things, don't we? So Slim is here for a reason. We have to understand something about energy, and this show is all about energy. But we also have to understand something about the physical self. All that energy out there in outer space somewhere does us no good whatsoever until we bring it into contact with something. Well, Slim is here to help us understand that thing that the energy contacts, that it must contact. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. And energy without a body, well, it might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. All right, previously on Energy Contact, we have been looking at a number of very invisible yet very real things. Electricity, radio waves, cell phone signals, love, peace, happiness, anger, frustration, all sorts of things. They're all around us. The list is limitless. And we have seen that what is visible and what is invisible has absolutely nothing to do with what is real and what is unreal. Einstein showed us, in fact, that the you on a projection of you, or the you on a home video somebody took, even the you on a photograph of you, has about as much real mass as this thing you call you. And so, knowing that, we've begun to experience ourselves in a brand new, but in a far more accurate way than ever before. We've started to see ourselves the way Einstein saw us, the way those old yogis and mystics saw us too, as a collection of bags of nothing, really, without any real physical substance to speak of at all. We've begun to see ourselves not as a physical creature that happens to have a little energy, but as an energy being that just happens to have a body. The physical part is in fact the unreal part. It's a hologram of sorts. It's an optical illusion. It's the energetic world of wavelengths and frequencies and vibrations. That's all that's real. That's all that matters. It's that frozen steam that Einstein explained so clearly. Yet most people, including people who understand Einstein, who study him, who use his theories, who teach his theories daily, they're either unwilling or unable to consider. What Einstein discovered, though, has plenty to do with that invisible body intellect that we've been looking at. Those same materials in our brains that give us thought, reason, recall, logic, memory, and intellect, intelligence, all those things you were always told in school are brain things. We've seen that they, in fact, permeate every cell of our body. They saturate every cell of our being. Your body is really just a physical projection of that unseen body intellect. Now, after spending the first 50 episodes of Energy Contact or so, looking at science and anatomy from a sort of energetic perspective, we found ourselves the last 17 shows and ongoing studying energy and mysticism, but from a scientific perspective. And that is what has led us to our study of chakras and Kundalini energy. We know now that the presence of this energy in us, this chi, this prana, whatever you want to call it, is that invisible thing that keeps us alive. That's precisely what it is. Because when it leaves us, we're dead. We're a corpse. And so it stands to reason that if we have more of it circulating through us more freely, we'll be more alive. This energy travels through us in this snake-like, undulating manner through energy vessels called nadis. It's the chakras that either open up or close off these nadis. It's the mind that opens and closes the chakras, and it's the body intellect that opens and closes the mind. Now, opening the chakras is not the goal, by the way. It's important to keep that in mind. It's just a way to get there. Great saints throughout history who never heard of a chakra, never had any idea of what it was, never knew any of this stuff. They did just fine in their spiritual and mental and physical evolution. It's important to keep that in mind. But it's also important to know that they did move invisible energy through their physical self on purpose and with awareness. And that brings us to today. Today we're going to continue our understanding of chakras. Because if we're going to go around opening things, it behooves us to know what it is we're opening, don't you think? The word chakra has just become a new agey buzzword that has no substantive meaning at all to a lot of the people who use it, who bandy it around. We want to go beyond that. We want to do better things. To understand the chakras, we want to understand a lot of other things. So we've been building up an encyclopedia of terms and functions over the past few shows, haven't we? We looked in details at these nadis and at this Kundalini Shakti. But there's another piece of the picture that we haven't brought up a whole lot. Today, that's where we're going. We're going to investigate your aura. At least we're going to introduce it. We're going to begin to get to it anyway. And to do that, we'll look a little bit more at the chakra colors and the things like that, and a lot more at these snake-like properties of Kundalini Shakti. because they have a lot to do with it. We want to understand ultimately what your aura is with respect to your chakras. But more importantly, we want to understand what it has to do with your health, growth, happiness, self-improvement, and the realization of your full potential, your true self. To understand the aura, though, from a practical basis, from a practical perspective, you're going to have to endure some science and some physics today. Now, it's not our purpose on Energy Contact to teach you a science class, to make you a PhD in physics or anything. But there's a false perception out there that these things, these chakras and auras, are just wild things dreamed up by wild-eyed hippies somewhere. And it is important to understand that all of this material is every bit as scientific as E equals MC squared. In our discussion of science, we're going to be glossing over a lot of things a little bit too quickly to allow the explanation to be real accurate. So we're looking at it conceptually. You physics professors out there, bear with me. And for the rest of you, we're going to make it as palatable and hopefully even a little bit as entertaining as possible. While all this investigation is worthwhile, it means that, to some extent, we're going to have to categorize and classify. Now remember, that's dangerous territory here on Energy Contact. And if we get too involved in that, it will start to lead us away from our goal rather than towards it. All right, so that's where we're headed today. But first, we've come to the part of the show where we get to take a break for a second. We've come to the part of the show where we take our virtual field trip, our journey in our mind's eye. So take a big deep breath, relax, close your eyes if you're in a place you can do that. And today, we are going to visualize that we are touring a big factory, a huge factory, lots of heavy machinery, stories tall, this stuff. It doesn't matter what kind of factory really. You can have your choice of there. Pick one you like. But the factory does have to have just a lot of huge machines in it. Big electric machines. There's no household current in this place. This stuff here requires all sorts of energy to run. And there's sometimes a hum as you get near things. There's so much energy moving through them. And we're touring this plant with the fellow who is responsible for the proper functioning of all these machines. He's carrying a meter with him, a voltage meter, a voltage reader of sorts. And as we tour through, he's walking up to every machine and he's pointing this measuring meter at it. And he's making a record of the results that he gets, what the readings say. He's taking a reading at one point of the machine and then he kind of orbits around the machine and takes it at different points. Then he climbs up ladders and takes the readings at the top of the machine versus the bottom. After that, he moves in closer and then he goes further out. And he just takes readings from all of these distances. And he begins to explain to you that he's reading the electromagnetic spectrum around these fields, the radiation field around these things. And he's doing that in order to know the function and the health, if you will, of these things, so that he can know if these machines are operating optimally and smoothly, or if there's some sort of need for repair, downtime, maintenance. Every machine, he tells you, has an energy field, and each one has its own characteristic energy emission. And the same machine will emit different energy fields from different areas of it. Even when the machine is dormant, it emits an energy field. The only time when it doesn't is when the machine is completely disconnected or when the machine is completely broken down. You can tell how the machine is doing, he tells you, if you can tell how the energy field is doing. Hold that thought. The mass in you is the same as the energy in you. What that means is that your muscles and bones and organs and nerves and such are the same as your chakras and nadis and organs and such, and aura and such, I should say. Now, even though the body is the same as the energy, even though the body is the same as the mind and the emotions and the spirit, there is a phase change that occurs with these things. We can explain it like this. Even though water is exactly the same as ice, is exactly the same as steam, in order for it to take the appearance of those other things, it has to undergo what appears to be a change. It's a phase change. The change isn't real. The appearance isn't real. It's an optical illusion. One of the ways we know this is because it can easily change back and then back and forth over and over again. There's no end to it. It's not changing what it is. It's only changing its phase. Now this is important to understand because it at least begins to explain why it's impossible to be a healthy person, a happy person, a spiritual person, until and unless you know something about how to promote the flow of invisible energy through your physical self. Let's see what all this has to do with auras and chakras. Let's bring up a slide. Here is a slide of some chakras and auras. The one on your left there, it has some springs on it, sort of a schematic model. I like that model. You can see on these two guys that the 7 chakras, they're sort of like gateways on a path, if you will. And that path, or that pipeline that they're on, is the Sushumna Nadi. We have thousands and thousands of nadis in us and hundreds of chakras. But most people, when they talk about nadis, mention only a dozen or so. We're concerned with 3 for now. And most people, when they speak of chakras, they're talking about the 7 biggest ones. For now, that's what we're going to be doing too. Now you'll notice that the middle 5 chakras have a front and a back, and they point out horizontally, parallel to the earth. The bottom and top one, they're vertical. They do not have a front and a back. They're perpendicular to the earth. In a way, they're sort of the front and the back of each other. Now notice the colors on your screen there. You'll notice that each of these 7 main chakras have their own color, and you can tell that each one has its own geometric shape too. And we'll see that they have their own sound. We'll come back to those in a future show. But for now, you want to notice that the colors of the chakras correspond to the colors of the rainbow, or more scientifically, the colors of the visible light spectrum. There are a couple of other things you can notice if you look closer. These pictures represent a feel for the upward motion of energy. And you can see that, or you can visualize that energy moving up through those rainbow colors. The red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet moving from the earth up. You notice too that these pictures show clouds of sorts around those 2 gentlemen there. And those energy clouds represent the aura. Now you can think of the chakras as the skeleton of the aura, and that's where we're headed today. For now, let's come back up here, because we first want to consider the phase of these things. Chakra colors and chakra sounds and chakra shapes, they're all important and quantifiable, and they're not arbitrary. They exist for a reason. They're the same as bones and nerves in us, too. Scientifically, we know something about these things. We know that mass is just a wave. It's a frequency and a vibration. We know too that every sound is a wave. It's a frequency and a vibration. And the different tones you perceive are just a function of the different lengths of the wave. Every color? Well, it's a wave and it's a frequency and a vibration. And what we see as different colors is just a function of the wavelength that resonates and bounces off of things. So energy, well, it's a wave. It's a frequency and a vibration. And as you may have guessed by now, you and I are a wave. We're a frequency and a vibration. This is Physics 101. At least it is these days. A few years ago, it used to be considered witchcraft. But while we're on the subject of witchcraft and physics, let's look a little more. I'll let you decide which one we're talking about. Every energy field, says the physics professor, has a proportional magnetic field that runs exactly perpendicular to it. So it shines out of it, like the rays shine out of the sun, if you will. And therefore, every magnetic wave has an electric field that shines out perpendicularly from that. Now we're getting a little technical here, so if you're getting lost, we're almost done. Hang on with me. But it's crucial to understand not the details of the scientific basis for this, just that a scientific basis exists. You can see on my magnets here, we'll look at these things. There is some invisible force at work here, huh? It attracts them together. That is, until you turn one of them around, and then we'll see if we get magnets on my floor or not. That same invisible force repels. Alrighty, so there are invisible fields like this one all over the place. Radio waves, cell phone signals, all sorts of things. The list is endless, and they're all going through you and me right now. So the fields that come from the machines in the factory, they shine out perpendicular from the machine in the same way that waves shine out from the sun. Are you with me here? The same way that the magnetic waves shine out from my magnets here. Light and color are a part of the electromagnetic spectrum too. Why do we want to know all this stuff? Hold on, we're going to flip back to that. But let's go over to chakras and auras for a second. The word nadi, as we have just seen, and as we've seen on previous shows too, means energy vessels. It's basically all it means. You can think of nadis as being to your energy what your blood vessels, your veins and arteries and capillaries, things like that, are to your blood flow. But of these thousands of nadis in us, the biggest by far is the Sushumna Nadi. Let's take a look at that. Let's bring up that slide. The Sushumna Nadi is just a pipe. It's that skinny pipe in the middle of that thing on the right of your screen there. And it functions a little bit like that medical symbol thing there. That's called a caduceus, and energy undulates through it in a snake-like manner up from the earth. You can see that color scheme again. You see the two snakes there on that caduceus? If you look close, you can see them wrapping around the Sushumna Nadi too. Those snakes represent two other main nadis. They're called the Ida and the Pingala, and they run upwards through those circular discs in an undulating and snake-like fashion, and the energy runs through them that way. They're all going around that Sushumna and those chakras in the same way that the snakes are going up the caduceus. Can you see that? Running through those circular discs there, or the dots on the caduceus that represent the chakras. All right, let's come back up here. Now we've been looking at Kundalini energy, and the word Kundalini we've seen means snake. And so the Kundalini energy is what's rising up the Sushumna and the Ida and the Pingala nadis. And it's passing right through the chakras, or at least it could be. Let's change gears again. We're going back to physics class. According to Einstein and Gandhi, and the old mystics too, by the way, there are no colors, but yet we see colors. So what is it that we see? Let's take a science class look at that, and let's go right to our next slide. This is the entire electromagnetic spectrum. All of these things represent a lot of those things that I was telling you about that are running through us every minute of the day. Now, most of those waves on that range are innocuous. They're neither good nor bad for you. Some of them are sort of healthy, and others will kill you. But the difference between those properties, it's all a function of the wavelength, and maybe a little bit the concentration. Now look at that tiny little white dot in the middle, the white bit of bar, the thing those colors are coming out of. That is tiny. That's the tiny visible spectrum of light in that whole range. That's all that you see. So there's a lot going on in the universe that your eyes aren't taking in. Now look just above that, at that sine curve looking thing up there. Imagine it moving and oscillating, because it does. Would that start to resemble a snake to you? Something in the snake-like motion of that oscillating energy wave is what generates that spectrum. Let's move right to the next slide. We're talking about things that look like snakes. Well, here's 5 things that look like snakes. Your spine looks a little like a snake, and on this slide, I put a snakier looking caduceus up there for you. Can you see that? That's for your entertainment pleasure there. Now that thing on that little blue field, that's a distillation column, and we looked a whole lot at that a few shows back. We saw that Kundalini energy moves up through you, like the steam moves through a distillation column. The mechanism is the same. Now the old mystics knew about how energy moves a few millennia before the scientists knew how steam distills. And, wait a minute, what's that other thing on your screen? Oh my goodness. That is DNA. It's your genetic fingerprint. All right, let's come back up here. And look right here. Here's another spine. It looks like a snake, don't you think? Your spine looks like that too. So if it looks like a snake, and if it undulates like a snake, well then maybe, just possibly, it's a snake. Or maybe it's a spine, or a wave, or a light, or a frequency. Or maybe it's Kundalini energy. Anyone who has had grade school physics knows that this is precisely how all energy moves. All energy moves in snake-like fashion. Did you study that? The sine curves and the wavelengths and such? They're all snake-like in their appearance and in their motion, even in those very simple textbook diagrams. We like to say on energy contact that today's science is yesterday's mysticism. Well, we've already seen a couple examples of that today. The old mystics, they didn't understand physics and trigonometry and distillation and things like that, but they knew how snakes moved. and they knew how energy moves. They probably knew how energy moves better than we've figured out in a scientific context yet. Science has understood a little something about energy motion for a few hundred years now. Well, congratulations. Those old mystics knew it 8,000 years ago. But on that spectrum again, we're going to come back to that in a second. You'll see that there's only a tiny little portion of that that is visible. Let's bring that up. In that tiny little area there that the colors are coming out of, those are the colors of the rainbow. Remember, there are no colors. Color is just a perception. There's only the pure white light. Now, you've heard that somewhere just outside your body is where your aura lies. But if you look at this spectrum, somewhere just outside that visible range of the electromagnetic spectrum, you can think of that as where your aura lies. All right, and you see that the visible spectrum generates in the colors of that rainbow there. And that prism? Well, it was Newton who explained that to us. So let's come back up here. And to put it a little bit more plainly, if the whole entire electromagnetic spectrum is like that, the visible range is about like that. Remember those machines on your field trip? Your aura is every bit as real and every bit as palpable, tangible as the energy fields around those machines. It can be measured, and it's because it's every bit as detectable. And if you have the right meter properly calibrated, you can know everything you need to know about them. And if you know how to read it, and if you know what those readings mean. Some people, by the way, can read those auras without the machinery. Now, our friend in the factory had a lot more than a voltage meter. He had to know how to use it. Remember that the measurements are all different distances from the machine that he took. Before we run out of time, let's bring one more slide up on here. And you'll see different distances from your body. The human aura has layers. It has layers like an onion. Can you see that layer effect there? The energies fields around those heavy machines had that, and you have that. Here's how that is. It's a ripple effect. Remember we saw the energy fields that had the magnetic fields and the magnetic fields that had the energy fields? Well, on and on it goes. Each energy field generates the magnetic field, which generates the energy field. And it goes on and on and on in more subtle ways. And that's what we're getting to. To understand the aura, you don't have to understand all this science, but you do have to understand that there's some science going on. Remember, all of this has a whole lot to do with your health and growth and self-improvement. And that's what we're going to get to next time on Energy Contact. Until then, I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life in Energy Contact.